So as you can see, I like to play an Argonian healer. This is purely personal preference, I would say. I don't think that he's necessarily the best. I just like playing Argonian. I really like the passives that they give you. I think that they've got some of the best passives in the game for healing. So ignore the first one, that's not very useful. This is obviously great. Increases max magic by 3%, plus whenever you drink a potion you restore 12% max health, magic, and stam. So what this means is that any potion you drink is a tripod potion. You get everything back. If you drink a tripod, it's like you get all your resources back. It's insane. It's also one of the reasons why these make great tanks as well. Argonian resistance increases your max health by 9. That is huge. It makes you super tanky. In a trial, I'm pushing 20k health with some gear and 19 with Eben. Plus the disease and poison resistance is nice, but it's not a deal breaker. And then obviously quick to mend, healing done, and healing received by 5%. That's huge for a healer. So what does that mean? As an Argonian, you can see I'm typically probably... I see my food ran out, so let me quickly apply some food. I'm sitting usually at about 16, 17,000 health out of trial environment. So you can see here I'm sitting just under 18, about 36, 37,000 max magic recovery 21, 29. So that's my goal is usually about 2,000, 2,100. Spell crit and spell damage is pretty low, but at the end of the day, with everything going on in a trial, it's not necessarily crucial that you have a huge spell damage. Your heals are healing hugely as it is. Recovery and stam, health and stam recovery is a non-issue in a trial for a healer if you're running a master resto. In terms of a Mundus, I'm running the H-Knock for Magica recovery. You can basically balance based on what you wear. If you wear infused, you can increase max mag. If you wear divines, you increase magic recovery. It gives you more versatility. So that's race. Some of the other good races out there. I know that Breton is a very popular race. Max mag by 10%. Magic cost reduction by 3%, plus increasing spell resistance. It's a really nice healing ability. Healing race. Probably some would say better even than an Argonian. It depends on personal preference. High Elf is another one, an Ultima. Magica recovery, max mag, and then the increase in flame, frost, and shock damage doesn't really help much at all in a trial, but the other two abilities are huge. So that's race and Mundus. So essentially, when it comes to gear, it's pretty simple. We're typically running Spell Power Cure always as a base. Spell Power Cure gives a nice bonus when you heal a friendly target. Half the time you increase your weapon damage and spell damage. This is huge. It's always up. Both healers need to run it because it applies to up to 6 people in the group. So you need both healers to get all 12. Huge benefit. Mandatory set required for all trials. In terms of complementary sets, there's a lot out there. Basically, Twilight is one that I've run consistently in the past. As of this patch, I'll probably be running other sets. But Twilight is great because of the heal over time. Obviously, the main Mana Aegis makes you a little bit more tanky too. But the heal over time, if you look, it does about 25,000 heal over time over 10 seconds. Plus all the amount of force, critical damage increase, etc. The heal over time is what you're using this for primarily for the tank. You're going to throw them a shard, give them a real strong heal over time. Let them kind of pick up some 2,500 health per second for 10 seconds. Allows you time to springs another group or to do something else. The amount of force is great for groups, but typically DPSs can't synergize on the fly, so you're finding that it's not quite as effective as it could be. In terms of traits, you'll see I'm running Divines and Infused, a bit of a mix. This is personal preference. Again, based on the enchantment too, you can either run a try enchantment like I'm running here with Infused to get the extra increase, or you can just run straight max mag. It's really personal preference. How much stam you need to survive, how much health you need to survive, how much magic you need to sustain. You can mix and match. I know some healers run pure Infused, Some healers run pure divines. I run a nice mix. I like having the balance between max mag and magical recovery and health and stam. So you can see Twilight, I'm running it pretty much at the moment 5 pieces Twilight, 5 pieces Spell Power Cure. There is no head and shoulder set that's worth sacrificing your Master Restoration Staff. This drops in Vet DSA. You want to farm this. Trait-wise, you'd prefer to have Powered. Sharpened is not best in slot. But the tick of Grand Healing, the first tick that restores Stam, is a huge boon, plus the Max Mag. I run on my back bar a Master Lightning Staff because I don't like the Magicka dip. I just need to gold this one out. Again, Decisive is non-best in slot. Best in slot trait will be Powered or Defensive. Other sets that you can run. So Twilight is a great set, but it's being slowly phased out. Infel Ether, last patch was great. Fully charged, heavy attacks, blah, blah, blah. Apply minor vulnerability. That debuff is now being applied by Lightning Concussion, which means that as of the last patch, this set is effectively useless, except for one specific situation, which is the first 2 bosses in AA that cannot be concussed. You can run Infel as a healer there, apply the debuff to the boss so it's applied, and then switch after those 2 bosses to one of the other sets. Which sets would you switch to? Well, there's a couple of options. Worm is one that's pretty common. Really nice reduction in Magicka cost for the entire group. Really, really nice in trials. A lot of the damage is coming from Mag. This is probably one of the best in slot, best gears to run at the moment for trials. Another really good option would be Mending. Mending is getting more popular these days. Essentially what it does is it applies an extra debuff whenever you use an Area of Effect heal ability, which is all the time. All creatures within 10 meters of you, so if you're close enough to the stack, this will apply to the boss or to the ads, get a reduction in damage. Testing has shown that this works across the board, nearly every single situation. It doesn't really matter if it's the AoE from a Overcharger or if it's a boss ability, you are reducing the damage and it's applying a really nice debuff. So for most trials right now, I would say Mending and Worm are the 2 sets that you want your healers to run. Specific trials, you may want to slot in some Infel Ether for certain fights where you can't concuss. And then there's a couple of other sets out there that are worth looking at but aren't necessarily best in slot. Healers, obviously one, gives you minor mending, which is nice. And then Sanctuary is another one. Sanctuary is great, increases healing received by 12% for you and the entire group. This is huge. I've personally run Sanctuary without any issues in Vet Horror hard mode. Really, really nice buff because the boss hits so damn hard. So that's the sets. So basically you're going to run a Master Resto always. If you can't get a Master Resto, you can run an SPC and then maybe put a Troll King in there, or you can put a Twilight as a Twilight Resto and then run a Troll King. Troll King is a nice boost to healing, but you're never going to run 2 pieces heads and shoulders because it's just not feasible. You're going to always want to run a Master Resto and a Master Destro, or a Resto and a Destro. So that's gear. Skills. So pretty simple. Basically, you're running most of the Templar abilities. First skill line, Adric Spear, you're really only doing Luminous Shards. Luminous because it gives back Magicka and Stam. But essentially, this is your go-to synergy for tanks and DPSs. Gives them a boost in resources. Plus, if you're running Twilight, it gives them a nice heal over time. Plus, increases their damage. Dawn's Wrath. Primary ability you're going to run here is a Nova. I'm off it to Solar Prison. I like the extra damage. Effectively, what it does is a huge debuff, reduces incoming damage by 30%. You're going to want to drop this every time there's a big damage ability down. So what I would say is think Overcharges and VSO. This is a great ability. Every Overcharger pull, you want to drop a Nova. You want to melt the Overcharger. This is going to help you do it and keep everyone up. Dark Flare, pretty much only used in dungeons. You would never run this in trial. But if you need to put a bit of damage on because it's an easy heal, easy fight to heal, you can always throw this on. Power of the Light. This is a controversial one. It's a stamina ability. Essentially, the only reason you run this is because there's no such thing as a decent Stamplar in a trial, or so I've heard. Stamplars just cannot put out the damage. If you do have a Stamplar, he can run this. It'll be far more beneficial for him to run it based on the damage. But you're running this because of the Minor Fracture and Minor Breach. That is the only Minor Fracture and Minor Breach in the game. This always stacks. You want to have this up 100% time on the boss for that incremental debuff. Radiant Destruction, Radiant Oppression. You're going to run this again in dungeons where you're doing some very light healing and you can put out a bit of damage in between. Breath of Life is your insta-heal. Nothing like it in the game. Closest you get is Twilight from the Berserk pet. Really, this is going to be your go-to whenever you see a health bar plummet. You're going to spam this until you get everyone back up. It's non-line of sight. You don't have to drop it on them. You can actually just be facing away. As soon as you see their health drop, if they're in 28 meters, you spam this and bring them back. That is your go-to. Healing Ritual, you don't typically use it much because of the cast time, but it is a nice buff. Haven't really found a strong use for it yet. Radiant Aura is a nice ability to have slotted after the latest patch. The Magic of Steel applied to all creatures within 28 meters is huge. The only issue is there is no visual cue. You cannot tell that it's applied, but it does negate the need for Ellie Drain. Ellie Drain gives you the debuff, but as long as you have someone piercing, if you have a tank piercing, it's not necessarily necessary. This is a great ability to run. I would typically run this and have other healer run Ellie Drain just to ensure uptime for Magic of Steel for our Magic of DPSs. Extended Ritual. I like this. It cleanses more effects. Very useful in more blockage. Other fights where there's a lot of dots that are applied. Allies can synergize and cleanse, plus they get a heal. This over the other morph because the other morph does damage, which draws aggro. Restoring Focus is a really nice tanky ability. It gives you more physical spell resistance, plus you gain Minor Vitality. Minor Protection increases your healing received and reduces damage taken by 8%. This makes you particularly tanky. In terms of staff abilities, Destruction Staff, you're pretty much running Ellie Drain. This is the only thing you're going to run as a healer. It doesn't have a cast, which is nice. Applies a bit of a debuff, plus Mana Magic of Steel, which you're getting from your Radiant Aura as well. Sometimes you will run a interrupt if there is no one in it. For example, top boss, you need to do some interruptions. Not necessarily ideal, but it does happen occasionally. And then Elemental Blockade, you're going to run this on your back bar, make sure it's a lightning. Really because you want that blockade of storms, setting concussed enemies off balance. This is huge. You're going to want your DPSs, Magic DPSs, to run 75 Thermitage, which will give you an extra 10% increase in damage. And you're going to want to have blockade of storms up all the time. With all the lightning damage going on, it's probably redundant. But at the end of the day, it doesn't hurt having another piece of lightning up to ensure that there's incremental damage being done. What does it do? 75 into Thermitage increases their damage over time. The Exploiter is what you're using it as a healer for. You want to make sure that this is up as often as possible, as close to 100% as possible. That is a huge increase in damage for concussed creatures. So as a healer now, you're putting in a bit of a mixed ability on your back bar, just because it's beneficial to the entire group, which is what healing is all about. Restoration Staff, obviously Healing Springs is your go-to heal. Every trial you're going to be running this. Restores Magicka with each friendly target healed. You can basically infinitely cast it if you have everyone stacked. Rapid Regen, really more for dungeons and trials. It's useful as a huge heal over time, but in most trials you don't run it. Combat Prayer, really nice. It gives everyone Mana Berserk, Mana Resolve, plus it makes them a little bit more tanky with Mana Ward. This is something that you're going to have to get used to using. It is not easy to use. You're going to have to target the group specifically because it is a very narrow band of application. Siphon Spirit, last patch was very useful. This patch, you're not using it much at all. You're going to be running other abilities to get Mana Life Steal or Mana Magic of Steel. Light Armor almost exclusively if you can, unless you have the Undaunted passive. But most of the sets we run don't allow us to mix and match. It's all going to be light. If you're running light, you're going to want to harness Magicka always. Really nice shield, and at the end of the day, it gives you great resources back. Other abilities that you would run, Mage's Guild, you could run Entropy. I don't typically run it. It does give you the Magicka recovery max. It gives you, what does it give you? Entropy gives you damage over time plus heal over time. Major Sorcery, so increases your spell damage. Undaunted, Blood Altar's nice ability, gives Mana Lifesteal. You want to cast this and run away. It's got a real long duration. It's got a cast time, so you've got to be careful where you use it. But I have seen it being a little bit more used in trials than it has in the past. Inner Fire is a ranged taunt. Really odd to have it as a healer, but you use it on Last Boss DSA, where you're taunting the boss and basically tanking him at the entrance. Mystic Orb, I like this morph because there's a lot of healing going on in a trial, and anything you can do to increase the Magicka recovery or sustain of your Magicka DPSs is great. I like to throw Mystic Orb. It keeps everyone happy. It keeps the DPSs topped up with Magicka. Plus, if I'm running Twilight, it gives them incremental heal over time, and it also improves their damage with Mana Force, I think it is. Aggressive Warhorn is the ulti you use the most. Really beneficial in a trial. You want to try and keep 100% uptime between the two tanks and the two healers. Rapid Maneuver obviously is used essentially just to get around. And then Cleanse we're using particularly in more Vlacage to clear effects. It's also a high cost ability, so you would spam this in VSO Last Boss to do a Magicka dump when required. Mystic Guard, you don't really use it much, but you can use it to put a life bond between you and the tank. It keeps him up. As an Argonian, it's helpful because I'm cracking 20,000 health, so I can put up a Mystic Guard without too much stress. So that's pretty much all the abilities. The only other thing I would say is food and potions. If you take a look at the food and potions that I use, I typically use Max Mag, Max Health. This to me is the best. You do have to keep it up, which is a bit irritating. You want to put it on your you want to slot it so that you can get to it fast on your bar. Try stat foods if you need more stam. Think Last Boss in Hellra, where you're doing a lot of block casting in Shihai phase. You're going to want to have more stam. This is a great ability. This is a great food to carry just for those fights where you're struggling to block or roll or break free. Witch Mothers is another option which I've used before, but it does make you a little bit susceptible because of the reduction in max health. But it's a great max mag, max health, Magicka recovery. And then if you're a vampire, you're going to want to drink double Bloody Marys. Maras, this will reduce the vampirism effect. If you are a vampire, I'm not. If you are, I would recommend always running trials at 1 or 2 vampirism at the most. Otherwise, you're too susceptible to fire and other abilities. Potion-wise, tripots on an Argonian are insane. They reduce huge amounts of resources because of the passive. Another thing that you could run is a trash Magicka potion for certain easy trials. This will give you back everything on an Argonian, plus the max mag. And then I run Spell Power. I think it's best in slot. The Major Sorcery, Major Prophecy is nice. And plus you get the Magicka back and Major Intellect. With the Argonian passive, this thing just applies so many benefits. It's insane. So that's pretty much it. I wanted to put this together so that I could have a resource to point people towards when it comes to healing. So let me just kind of run you through a basic rotation. Any fight that I'm running into, you're typically going to go drop your Ritual. You're going to drop your Blockade. You're going to make sure that you're springsing the group as much as possible. Throwing shards for the tank. Throwing blue balls for the group, wherever they are. Springs. It's not that hard. Breath of Life when required. Power of the Light up all the time on the boss. There's a lot of things to remember. There is no real rotation other than making sure you have your huts down, making sure that you have your springs going, making sure that you're alternating and switching, block casting, and keeping your blockade up. There's a lot of things to do as a healer in a trial, but at the end of the day, it's really all about situational awareness, knowing where everyone is at all times, and making sure that the tank always has a shard, making sure that any DPS that goes down has a shard. If they're Magicka, making sure that they have a blue ball they can synergize, and then keeping your heal over time up, keeping your blockade up, and making sure that you're constantly springsing the group. Other than that, I guess it really comes down to knowing your group, knowing their needs, and knowing your character, and knowing when to harness, and when to throw blue balls, and when to throw shards. It's really situational, and again, down to knowing your group and their needs. Healing is not something that you can teach. It's really something that they have to learn on the fly, other than the basics, of course, which is what I'm trying to show you here. If you have any questions, just reach out and let me know. But that's pretty much a basic Healing 101 overview.